welcome to this monthly meeting of Blockchain Ireland. My name is Paul Hearns. I've been a journalist and commentator in Irish IT and technology for 20 odd years, and I'll be moderating this morning. However, I'm going to hand over to Professor Joyce O'Connor.
Hi, good morning. I hope you're all keeping well and staying safe. I think the way I'm looking now, I think I'm in the shade, but hopefully as the morning goes on, things get brighter. My name is Joyce O'Connor, as Paul has said, a co-founder of BlockW and a member of the steering committee of Blockchain Ireland, together with Dave Feehan, Pierce Ryan, Larry Keogh and Bernard Gahan. So I particularly want to welcome you all here today. This is the first of a series of monthly meetings of the Blockchain Ireland cluster. Blockchain Ireland is in a new phase of development, as you know, and Technology Ireland ICT Skillnet is managing the cluster. We are asking you in the blockchain community to be part of the next phase of development, to provide the leadership to this cluster and to create an ambience of excitement around its future growth. I'd particularly like to thank all of you who answered our survey and took part in that in a very enthusiastic way. Thank you for your feedback, your ideas, and your encouragement. You told us what you would like to see happen and that you wanted to be an integral part of its development. Today's meeting is the first step. We have a very busy and interesting schedule, as you will see, and I will now hand you over to Paul to bring you over the next 1.5 hours for this exciting agenda. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Professor O'Connor. And yes, in terms of this morning's agenda, it'll take us up to 9:45. So we're going to have a presentation of the survey analysis from Laurie Keogh, who probably needs no introduction, but Laurie is a co-founder of Blockchain Ireland and adjunct assistant professor in technology at Trinity College Dublin. So we're going to have a survey analysis from Laurie, and then Laurie and I will do a Q&A afterwards to allow the attendees to respond to the results and add their own insights and comments on it, as well as ask any questions they might have. Now, I know a lot of you will have filled in the survey anyway, but again, it's an opportunity for you to address any issues that arise from it. Then we are going to have our guest speaker, and we are delighted to welcome Barry Lowry, the Irish government CIO, again, a man who needs no introduction. So Barry is going to talk about government and its views, usage of blockchain and distributed ledger technologies. And we're going to have a Q&A session after that as well. So please do take full advantage there. Barry is in a very good position to answer any questions you might have around government or public service use of the technologies. So at 9:40 or so, I'll be handing back then just for a round off to Professor O'Connor, and we will have hopefully a provisional date for the next Blockchain Ireland meeting at that point too. So we'll welcome now Laurie Keogh to go through the survey analysis, which was the survey which was conducted in October of this year. Laurie?
Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everybody. So survey results. So first of all, echoing Joyce's comments there, thank you very much to everybody who took the time to fill this in. We're going to be conducting surveys on a more regular and more frequent basis to keep a constant pulse check in terms of what Blockchain Ireland is doing, and to make sure that we're doing what I guess the group and all its members would like it to be doing and like it to be achieving. So definitely expect to see more surveys. So I appreciate your ongoing help and support with that. So the first question that we asked was, are you happy to remain a member of Blockchain Ireland, which was a fantastic result and a resounding success in that the answer was 90+% yes. which is great. So not a huge amount to, I guess, analyze there. I think that's a positive result. In terms of question 2, what would you like to see more of from Blockchain Ireland? Examples such as events or webinars. And it's hard to, I guess, bring in, over 40 or 50 comments into one slide. So I've tried to be balanced in terms of the comments that I'm playing back to everybody, and certainly happy to discuss any other points that people raise that perhaps weren't on the slide when we go through the Q&A piece a little later on. So one thing that came out, which is really interesting, and will probably feed into what Barry's going to talk about, and really hopefully what we'll talk about later on as well in terms of goals for 2021, is a national blockchain strategy. So that was somebody called out. So case studies of successful blockchain deployment. So ideally more meetups in person at some stage. So I think, case studies are fantastic. And I think there's been a number of those in Ireland already, whether it be the great work that Deloitte did with the Institute of Banking. EY is now really, I think, making a big play in terms of public Ethereum adoption. IBM has done a bunch of fantastic work, as has Consensus and many others. So I think there's a bunch, but I think it's probably working with everybody in the community to bring those stories under one roof and perhaps tell them through Blockchain Ireland, which I think would be very powerful. And more meetups. I think we all are very much looking forward to doing that again in 2021. So international presenters and case studies of successful blockchain deployments at monthly meetings. Okay, so also I think that's a really valid point in terms of not just thinking about Ireland, and we've spent time talking about that ourselves. And Joyce will cover actually, and Dave Feenan, what we have lined up over the coming months in order to bring that international dynamic. So virtual networking in the current environment, more frequent communication with the steering committee. So virtual networking, we're doing our best to do that, and this is obviously the start of that initiative, and to do it on a consistent and routine basis. And then more frequent communication with the steering committee. I think that's a fair comment, and that is something that we need to not only say that we've listened to, but act upon and demonstrate in the coming weeks and months. So webinars, collaboration sprints, research opinion pieces. So webinars, we will do those consistently. And where there's opportune moments to do something on a specific topic, we will do our best, but we'd love to hear from you as to what you would like those topics to be. Research and opinion pieces, we're going to touch on that in terms of the working groups, because what we'd really like to see is how do the working groups potentially produce those rather than always be the steering committee, and potentially could the working groups research and opinion pieces maybe fall into the overall national blockchain paper that we'll discuss and touch on. So presentations of implemented use cases, and you can see a big trend here, which is really the applications. So I think that's a big theme that came out, and I think that's a really valid one, and one in which Barry will touch on as well. So is there an outline of the mission, purpose, and desired outcomes? We actually have a strategy, and have had a strategy, believe it or not, since 2016. Even though the group started in 2015, we've had one. But I think that's another one for the group and for us to put up on our website as to what the strategy is. In terms of vision, it's always been two things: one, to make Ireland a global blockchain hub, or global blockchain and crypto hub, and secondly, to create jobs around blockchain and crypto in Ireland. That has been the overarching vision since we started in 2015. So question 3, what would you like to see less of in Blockchain Ireland? Okay, individual company pitches, and that was put forward by a number of individuals. So there's definitely feedback there on that point. In-person only events. And I think this is a really interesting point. And I think people have spoken about this prior to COVID as well, is that, should the meetings always be in Dublin? And I think there's strong feedback, and Dave Feenan has really championed this, saying that, you know what, we need to get out of Dublin. We need to get over to Sligo. We need to get down to Cork, and we need to get down to Galway and Limerick, and right around the country to host events. So whether we do that on a virtual basis to start, and then when things get back to, I guess, being able to meet physically, we'd be delighted to do that. So I think that's a great suggestion. So thank you for putting that forward. Everything Dublin based, I guess, is similar comments. So that is message received. And looking forward, I think, to getting on the road, whether it be virtual, physical, or both. So they were some of the major feedback points in terms of seeing less of. There was a lot of positive feedback in relation to, I guess, the work that's been gone on to date. But look, we're by no means perfect. And the more feedback you guys give us, the more we will listen and the more we will do. So I think you have all of our commitments on that. The next question was, would you be willing to join a working group? And also, I guess, an overwhelming amount of positivity and people willing to reach out and give their time on this, which is really fantastic. And I think now what we need to do, and also which we'll touch on later, is how do we harness all that, positive energy and willingness of folks to provide discretionary effort in those working groups, and who's going to lead those working groups, and what are they trying to achieve, and what does that feed into in the overall strategy and vision of Blockchain Ireland. So I think that's definitely one that we'll touch on later on as well. Which working groups would be of the most interest to you? So please pick two. So it's a pretty good spread is probably what I would say. But look, great to see a huge amount of interest in enterprise, which I think goes back to and links to the call out for case studies and live deployments. So I think that's really positive. And from an enterprise perspective, if there are people who really want to lead that group, I think there's a potential, certainly opening in the steering committee or advisory board to really help drive that. So we'd love to hear more about what the suggestions there are. Also, startup, I think, is another area where we need to get more focused. So if there's somebody who has, I think, strong startup experience, ecosystem experience, who would like to lead that group and who's going to, really be the voice of startups for blockchain companies in Ireland, I think there's also a big opportunity to work with Blockchain Ireland and work with the whole group in order to drive something there. And also look at picking a third one is Blockchain Ireland Week. So Blockchain Ireland Week didn't happen in 2020 for obvious reasons, but certainly a big goal for Blockchain Ireland in 2021 is definitely to do Blockchain Ireland Week again. And we'd love support with that. It's a big, push to get it up and running, to have 50 events, all free, and also around the country. That's what happened actually last time around. So we'd love to try and top that and maybe see if we could have 50 plus or even 75 events in 2021. And that absolutely doesn't happen by itself. So we're going to need lots of help to achieve that exciting event. And spread the word around blockchain and crypto and all the great work that's taking place in Ireland in those areas. So I'll push on. So would you be supportive of paying a fee to be a member of Blockchain Ireland? So this was cover costs, including events, working groups, and website, etc. So I think just to recap briefly on this, so everybody's aware, Blockchain Ireland, in every capacity, including your own, is a voluntary group. And we've been very fortunate over the years to have support from Enterprise Ireland, from the IDA, from the Department of Finance, and many other institutions for that matter, to help get it up and running, and also to host events, to sponsor events. So it has been fantastic to have their support. Now, to bring it back into the IDA and Enterprise Ireland, it was always their goal from the start, when Keith Fingleton and I chatted about Blockchain Ireland, to enable the ship to set sail on its own and be an industry-led body. So it was always the IDA's goal, and it was really a matter of when, not if, that it would do so. And thanks to the help of the IDA, they've helped us really get Blockchain Ireland to where we are. And now we're growing up a little bit, and we're moving out. We're on our own. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to see if there is a membership fee structure that would really enable us to just cover costs, simple as that. So really just to enable us to host events, enable us to run websites, enable us to run social media, and bring the community together on a consistent basis. So by no means a profit-making venture, but really just to enable the group to operate well. Okay, so I think we'll drill down in the next question as to what are the considerations in relation to that membership fee structure. So different categories I think were discussed, such as corporate, startup, and individual. And those who are familiar with, I'm sure, these tiered structures for different groups and communities, I think certainly they seem to be more acceptable rather than just a flat fee. So yes, I would tier the membership to allow more attendees from larger companies and give the chance for individuals to get involved also. Okay, so that tiered membership model was suggested many, many times and seems to be the overarching theme in relation to a Blockchain Ireland membership fee structure. So no was another point, just to provide balance, right? Best to keep the meetings as simple and inexpensive as possible. Okay, absolutely. I guess the trade-offs on this is we're probably would be limited in terms of what we could do in terms of physical meetings, in terms of going on the road and things like that, as expenses would be incurred on all the members who are acting on a voluntary basis. I think a graded system would be useful. Corporates pay more than startups, and that is that typical tiered structure. So it would be X amount for corporates, maybe X amount for universities or academic institutions, X amount for startups, and then down the bottom, X amount for individuals, as the case may be. So no, just to give more balance on this as well. Right now, there's a need to be as inclusive as possible and to organize a community rather than a lobbying machine. If a few select enterprise members wish to fund a few part-time or full-time folks, then this might be a way to start. Okay, so I guess this is the challenge that we've also spoken about as a group, as an advisory board. Is Blockchain Ireland absolutely wants to be as inclusive as possible, to bring in individuals and all the other categories that I mentioned there, because that was the goal. We want to build a really fantastic, active community, and not for it to be restricted to those who have availability of funds readily at their disposal. So this is where we need to figure out what that optimal model is, that we're able to bring everybody into the net. So I guess another quick one here. Yes, to find activities. So put a limit on the number of people who participate as corporate, as otherwise you could end up with a large company having more people attending an event or influencing too many things or decisions. Okay, so that's, I think, an important point to note, and I think that's really incumbent on the advisory board members to make sure that there isn't one dominant voice over another, and that there is a spread of voice amongst startups, amongst academia, amongst education, amongst enterprise, etc. So I think that's a great point, and keeping our group honest. If there is value for the membership, I would see no issue with the tiered system to enable all stakeholders in the ecosystem to participate. So I think overall, on balance, the majority was in favor of a membership fee, but really on the basis that it is tiered in order to be as inclusive as possible. Okay, I'll move on. So would you like Blockchain Ireland to become a government recognized entity? Also, look, a big, I guess, resounding yes on that front, 70+%, which is fantastic. And the reason why that question was asked is, in the past where Blockchain Ireland would have been asked to attend events, it has been a specific question by the party hosting the event, that is this an official company? Is it a recognized entity of the Irish government, as the case may be? And because we were a voluntary, non-recognized or non-official membership body, that wasn't the case. So we've had to ask that question to ourselves many times in order to understand what's the best way that we can set up and organize and structure ourselves so that we're able to tick that box. Yes, we are a charity, as the case may be, or a membership, or whatever the legal structure is, so that we can attend certain specific events in future, or receive funding, as the case may be. So that was the logic and rationale behind that question. So question 9, would you be willing to host a virtual event for Blockchain Ireland Week in 2021? So look, also fantastic enthusiasm from everybody. So thank you very much for that. And there was great enthusiasm as well for Blockchain Ireland Week in 2020. And on behalf of everybody, I'm very sorry to disappoint everyone who kindly put forward ideas and their time and had started working on that. But I guess we're all in the same boat in terms of the challenges of this year. But most importantly, based on the latest research, is that same energy and goodwill and commitment is going into 2021. And there's been a whole host of companies who've come forward and said we're looking forward to hosting an event, and whether that was CBRE, whether it was Fidelity, amongst many, many others. And they're, fantastic brands and fantastic companies who are, doing great work in the blockchain space. And I'm sure have lots of case studies that we were able to talk about as well. So I think there's a real bright future for Blockchain Ireland Week in 2021. So we'll move on into that was question 9, right? So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour in terms of the survey results. And what I plan to do now was, just maybe, I know a little early on time, which is no bad thing, was to really, I guess, open it up to Q&A and hand it back to Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, Laurie. Maybe just to start, Laurie, I'll just put one question first and allow people to kind of gather their thoughts and get typing on those. But just from the survey results, what were the sort of standout points that you saw? Because there were a couple of very interesting things there in terms of a willingness to remain as members, but also the points around the sort of goals and mission statements and the nature of the organization going forward. So just overall, what were the standout points for you?
Yeah, look, and I think that's a great place to start. And really, it does come back to, I guess, vision, mission, and strategy as to the reason for Blockchain Ireland to exist. What is its purpose? And I think that's a really fair question. And a number of people asked it. And it does go back to those 2 points that I mentioned around the vision, which and mission, which really is, Ireland to become a global blockchain and crypto hub and to create jobs in the space around blockchain and crypto. And that was the initial goal. And I still think it's an appropriate stretch ambition that we'll always be striving for. So I think that's part A. In terms of strategy and, how do we execute against that, which strategy is all about in terms of, organizing to execute. And in 2021, and we'll be discussing this in the December meeting as well in more detail, and keen to get everybody's feedback and input into this. Certainly what my proposal to the group would be is that we keep things really simple in 2021. We try and do maybe 3 or 4 things, and we do them really, really well. So to give an idea on maybe what those 3 or 4 things are, I think having a view or a position paper on the potential of a national blockchain strategy for Ireland is a really interesting one, and I think it's something that the whole community could work together and work on. And that includes each of the working groups participating, such as, I guess, developer or education and startup and corporate or / enterprise, all feeding in a specific section that goes into the overall position paper. Now, for those I'm sure who have seen, Australia has a national blockchain strategy documented, and that's out in the open. So does Germany, so does Italy. There's one being produced by France. So it's really interesting to see, and I think it's an opportunity to Ireland to explore what the possibilities are. So that's probably number 1. I think number 2, the no-brainer is Blockchain Ireland Week, and there's a huge amount of goodwill, and I think that will be a great success in 2021. I think also as a group and as an advisory board, it's really very important for us to deliver for this group consistent monthly meetings, but also consistent monthly meetings of value. And that is having people like Barry speak this morning, I think is a fantastic start to the new Blockchain Ireland, if you will, but also bringing in other speakers consistently that are going to engage the community and people want to see. And really, I think that the 4th point, which I kind of touched on before, it is it's the enabling of the working groups, so that they have a clear reason to exist as well. Like, what's the purpose of the developer group? What's the purpose of the startup group? So it's working to identify, right, who's leading that group, who's part of that group, what's the purpose, and letting them figure out what they want to do. This isn't a case where the advisory board members are saying, you do this. Far from it. It is letting them find out what they want to do themselves, and then holding themselves to account, and then enabling them to feed in back to the wider group, but also to the overall strategy. So I think less is more, and we under promise and over deliver, and we keep it simple.
Okay. Well, jumping in then to the questions that are coming in, structure and organization is the first one, really. So the question here is, it may already be too late, but could Blockchain Ireland become a cooperative? Would that incentivize people to become members? That is more in line with the ideals of decentralization and governance, etc. So it's one possible direction for it. Is that something that would be considered?
It's certainly something that we consider. We're open to all ideas. So, Alan, thank you for the question. And we are in listening mode as an advisory board based on the feedback that you provided in the survey, but also based on the proposals that we're hearing today. So everything's on the table. I think my thoughts just a few moments ago in relation to what's the best way and easiest way to structure so we can nail those kind of 3 or 4 things. For me, as one member of this group, to which there's 100 people on this call, that's my view. But I'm really keen to figure out that if a cooperative seems to be the best structure for us to enable us to really execute very efficiently, then I think, then that needs to be looked at. So thank you very much for the suggestion.
Okay. Another question then was, do you see Blockchain Ireland expanding and allowing other technologies such as artificial intelligence to become part of what would be described as blockchain fusion? So I suppose that's an inevitable direction in terms of blockchain as a technology layer in a stack as solutions are developed and new directions go in. So would you see the scope of the focus expanding to include those kinds of things?
What I would say, and I sound like a squeaky wheel here, but I think the key thing is that we, as Blockchain Ireland, what are the things that are really important to the members? What are the really important things that the community want us to focus on? And I think, first of all, is definitely blockchain. But if there are applications and areas of interest where blockchain intersects with AI, then absolutely, let's discuss those. It may be, if that becomes a big focal area where there are real industry problems that need to be solved, and blockchain and AI is a really strong fit, perhaps there'll be a separate working group just specifically on that area. So I'm absolutely not going to say no or never. But I do want to suggest that, where success happens is that you get really focused on doing a limited set of things. And that's when you deliver on those things. And then you can expand over time. So I think for us, especially now in our kind of second birth of Blockchain Ireland, it's really important for us to have a laser focus on a small number of things, execute really well on those, and then continue to iterate and listen to what folks are seeing and hearing on the ground with their companies, with their startups or governmental entities. And if there is something on AI, be delighted to discuss it. And maybe we have a monthly meeting on it. And if there's a big swell of activity around it, then let's get a working group up and running.
Okay. We have one more question there just in terms of potential future funding. But just we'll come to it in a moment. Just to come back on that, from the results, there were calls for more to be done on certain aspects. So there was calls for more technical information, some of the more commercial concerns as well, perhaps commercial applications, but also legal considerations. So given your general kind of analysis of it, what's your feeling in terms of a balance between those sort of not necessarily competing, but certainly relevant requests?
Yeah, look, fantastic point. And this is the world of of technology that we live in, is that especially disruptive and emerging technology, it raises questions because the technologies look to do things in different ways, which push, challenge, and stretch tax systems and legal systems, as the case may be. So what I would say on that is, number one, on the legal side, we have a fantastic human being in Pierce Ryan, who leads the legal working group. And Pierce would love to hear from people who would like to join the legal working group and to discuss these matters in detail. And I think truthfully, obviously, Pierce is a fantastic lawyer. He is far better placed than me to discuss anything and all things legal. I think in terms of other areas that come up, it's really what area, if there is a specific question, does that land in a specific working group? Because chances are there's a real subject matter expert that would be able to help there. So similarly, Bernard Cochran, in terms of the developer working group, who's working on Project Emerald, which is a fantastically interesting project around identity solutions in the island in Ireland, he would be a great person to talk to in terms of technical matters. So I think this is the strength of the community that Blockchain Ireland brings, is that there's point people who are real experts in what they're doing on those topics. So I by no means have all the answers, far from it.
Okay. Well, just coming back to that question then, in terms of future funding. So building on from the potential co-op organization, but what do you see as potential sources of future funding? You already mentioned that there's been quite a bit of support from a fairly diverse range of agencies and groups, as well as the fact that we're being hosted here by ICT Skillnet this morning. So where would you see any specific areas that you would be targeting in the future, as well as looking at the potential for a tiered level of subscription?
Look, I think it'd be fantastic if we were able to get funding from a number of sources, but also we need to cut our cloth accordingly. We don't in Q1 and probably even to Q2, our lives will still remain largely virtual. So the funding we need to operate won't be vast. And that's an important point. Once again, to reiterate, we're not trying to, generate more funds that we need. So I just want to kind of, I guess, manage everyone's expectations in terms of what we need to get by. I think when we do come back to physical meetings, the need for funding increases because we need to look at space, we need to look at refreshments, we need to look perhaps at travel costs. But there are simple overheads also around websites and things like that. And also potentially getting in guest speakers that there may be a small fee associated with. So what do I think in terms of funding? I think, if we had a corporate sponsor per meeting or per quarter, that could be helpful. If there was a government fund that we could tap into on a limited and small basis, that would be fantastic. So it's really, we're open to suggestions, to be totally frank, but really want to reiterate to everybody what we're trying to do is we're trying to keep the ship afloat and keep providing great, consistent monthly meetings that people want to attend because they want to learn, they want to be part of the community, and we want to do that in the most efficient way we can. So open to all suggestions, and if there are folks who are part of different companies on the call and they want to participate and help funding with Blockchain Ireland, we are certainly all ears.
Great. Okay. Well, there's another question there around the fact that you mentioned other national blockchain strategies and quite a few within Europe specifically. So the question then follows that are there other national blockchain group models that Ireland could learn from or perhaps interact with?
Great question. And the answer is yes. Without stealing other folks' thunder, Joyce is going to touch on that a little bit later on. But certainly, look, I think you can, a great example for me is the Crypto Valley Association in Switzerland. So there's a gentleman actually who set that up, believe it or not, a guy called Kevin Lally from Galway. And the advisory board has spoken with Kevin. And we will be having a monthly meeting where Kevin is going to present on why he helped start the Crypto Valley Association in Switzerland, what its purpose is, and how we can potentially work together. And also, to be quite frank, and we had a really good conversation with them, it was to learn about, what have they done right and wrong to help get them where they are? And what do they continue to focus on at the moment? So that's definitely something that we'll be doing early in Q1. So a great question. And it's something that we're staying on top of because, look, do we have lots of room for improvement? We do. And are we thinking about others who are doing great work in this space? Yes. And there's probably lots of things that we can learn from them and quickly replicate.
Okay, thank you. Well, there's just a comment there following up on the AI points that were made there, which says we are proactively building a commercial-driven AI ecosystem. Altada is heavily involved in block fusion. I'd like to understand the plan to help startups ramp up blockchain knowledge. So just thanks for that. And just before Laurie addresses that, please do feel free to use the Q&A. If you want to provide some insights or additional information, it's not just for questions. This is meant to be a discussion section, not just a Q&A. So please do add comments as you will. But again, that's a good point that the addressing startup needs is just as important as the enterprise side of things. And even though there's probably quite a large amount of knowledge out there, even at the startup level, helping startups understand how they can access the ecosystem is probably quite an important element of what the group will be doing going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, startups are absolutely critical. And how does Blockchain Ireland help them in terms of growing, in terms of introductions to different ecosystem players, in terms of, I guess, people who are working, who can help them from a legal perspective, tax perspective, setup perspective, whatever it might be. So I think this is really, for me, the working group, the startup working group is really important. And I think there's a space there for somebody who really is passionate about startups, who's passionate about blockchain, to come in and lead that and join the advisory board to help lead that group and be the voice of startups. So I think watch this space. I think it's an area that we need to do more work on. And we'd love people to get involved, and we'd love some help.
Okay. There's another question here then. Could blockchain coder Dojo be started? So again, a successful model that's been applied across a few areas.
100%, right? 100%. Look, I think Coder Dojo is a fantastic initiative. There's probably a bunch of people on the call who've had experiences of their own or through their kids in that initiative. And once again, I think, we'd be completely open to doing something like that. I think that would be an unbelievable idea. The trick is, how do we, whoever proposed that idea, I'd love to chat with them. How do we work together to get it up and running? That's the key thing. I think what folks have to remember is that, once again, there's a limited number of us in terms of being on the advisory board. And we have commitments in specific areas for Blockchain Ireland, and we'd love help. So if you have a great idea, definitely let's set up time, let's talk about it, but let's be prepared for all of us to roll up our sleeves and deliver on that.
Okay. There's just another comment here then from somebody who is with Microsoft Ireland, who said that I've been supporting a developers working group previously. How should I engage now concerning this new phase to keep my contributors as well as foster the collaboration?
Yes.
In advance.
So Juarez, Junior, look, thank you very much for the point. And I know you're doing fantastic work out in Microsoft in this area. And the best thing to do, and the first port of call 100%, is to get in touch with Bernard, who leads the developer working group, and to take it from there. Bernard has held many meetings and continues to do so. So it's just plugging in with Bernard, understanding what the goals of the group are, how best you can contribute, and what your goals are, Juarez, and what are Microsoft's goals, what's important to you guys, and then figuring out, what are the deliverables that working group needs to drive out in 2021. And it's really as simple as that.
Okay. There's another question then, just in relation to the blockchain effort linked with national AI strategy and national data governance strategy. So I think that's probably something that Barry might be able to address better than Laurie. So we might keep that one in hand for when we have the Q&A with Barry. And we're very grateful for the fact that Barry has been with us all morning so far and has been listening to the exchange and the analysis here, so he will be well informed by the time we get to him, as well as the information he has for us. So a little clarification there in terms of Altada is launching an accelerator with Tangent Trinity College Dublin in 2021, and they'd be happy to discuss collaboration with blockchain startups. So that's good there. Okay, well, just listen, we're slightly ahead of time, so I might just round off with just one last question for Laurie in terms of a sum up. This is kind of, and I think this the survey sort of supports this. It's almost the end of the beginning for Blockchain Ireland, and now it's going into a period of kind of maturity in terms of its operation going forward. So again, you said about setting out a couple of goals for 2021 and under promising and over delivering in that. So maybe if we could just kind of sum up around that, and we'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, exactly. Look, thank you very much, Paul. And once again, thanks to everybody for responding to the survey and giving us the information and I guess the pulse check as to what's really important to you guys. What do you want to see? And that gave us I guess grounds for great debate and discussion amongst the advisory board members to really figure out, right, what are we doing and what are we going to do in 2021 that is going to be meaningful? And it really is those couple of things that I said. So one, deliver consistent meetings for the group of high quality, with high quality speakers and content that people want to hear about, and do that really, really well. I think two, Blockchain Ireland Week is really important, and it was a great success when we did it in 2019, and we're looking forward to working with everybody again. Thirdly, it's setting up working groups that have a real purpose, and fourth, it's really aligning those working groups to the overall strategy of Blockchain Ireland, which will then potentially feed into that national blockchain paper, perhaps, that we can work on over the course of 2021 if people really feel that that's something that they're excited by, interested in, and feel it's something that the group should do.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Barry Lowry, our government CIO, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And as I said, you've been with us since the start. So you've heard all of the commentary and discussion so far. So hopefully that will help you when you're answering questions yourself. He is going to present on blockchain in government. And just a reminder that we do have a Q&A afterwards as well. So please do take advantage of that. So Barry?
Thanks, Paul. And first of all, guys, thanks for inviting me to speak to the event this morning. I'm always happy to engage with our startup industry and our SMEs, and always happy to engage on new opportunities for Ireland as well. Thanks also to Laurie, actually, for letting me sit in on the first session. I actually find it extremely enlightening because in some ways it's comforting to hear that you guys are a group of enthusiasts whose enthusiasm is extremely infectious, I should say. And you're going through a period now where you're trying to almost set out the next stage of your collective lives and how this organization develops and evolves. And in some respects, your journey isn't that different from what government is doing at a macro level, because government is looking at blockchain and AI and disruptive technology, and indeed the whole world of digital, and trying to work out how that fits within what government's vision is for Ireland, and how it fits with the more traditional industries in Ireland, agriculture, pharma, and so on. And it's difficult. And as we get to the end of the session, I'll show you some ideas of how we can go in this journey together, and work with each other to build something that makes sense to us all, and more importantly, that makes sense to the island. So what I'm going to cover this morning is the European interest in blockchain, the implementation challenge then of government, and then I'll talk, as I said, about maybe how we work with you guys to develop something exciting as we move forward. I wanted really, though, to start with a story, because Paul sent me some of your questions early to see if I could factor them into the presentation. And I think the last question that came through was related to the central bank, the government, and cryptocurrency. And I was chatting to my colleague, Mai Santa Maria, who some of you know, and thanks, Mai, for your help with this one. But it struck me when thinking about where cryptocurrency is going. And I guess the short answer is that, as you know, our finance minister, Pascal Donoghue, has a very influential position within Europe. And the European Central Bank has committed to look at the concept of a digital euro and to develop that concept going forward. And I think that will really get legs. Now, why will it really get legs? And that's where it reminded me of a discussion I had about 18 months ago with the Gartner analyst Hong LeHong. And Hong's one of the real Gartner rockstar analysts. He's one of the ones that tends to work in the more cutting edge areas. And he's a really clever guy. But he had this theory that the traditional world of the capitalist society ends up very slowly adjusting to disruptive technology and eventually working out a way to swallow it up. And if you think of the examples of, say, Uber and Airbnb, they haven't killed off our traditional taxi services and they haven't killed off our traditional hotel services. What they certainly have done is made those services better, because they've woken up, they've taken notice of this new way of thinking, and eventually they've absorbed that new way of thinking to deliver a better model, even though those disruptive technologies are still in operation. And why or how does that relate to the world of cryptocurrency? Well, for some time, the World Economic Forum has been talking about the benefits of a cashless society and how a cashless society can actually create a fairer society, and also de-risk some of the risks associated with money and even small banking, which we're all very aware of. Now, obviously, national governments are very slow to react to things like that, and extremely slow in Europe. They always say Germany is the one country in Europe which is most interested and loves cash the most. And that's why Europe is sometimes a little slow to react. But obviously, we've gone through, or we're in the middle of, this pandemic, which has been completely life-changing to us all in so many ways. And of course, one of the things we're seeing at a micro level is you go into your local grocers and they have a sign up saying, we prefer contactless. So all of a sudden, even at the individual level, we're starting to learn that technology is creating a solution to a problem. And because of that, we're moving in a direction. And so if you take that up to a macro level, of course, then governments are going to say, how does a digital currency work in Europe? And when you've got the problem of making a digital currency work in Europe, then you very quickly get into the conversation of distributed ledgers and blockchain. So in some respects, that's a good lighthouse or North Star, if you like, for how we might evolve blockchain into other areas and other problems in our society. Europe has been committed to blockchain for some time. I'm not going to read every word in this, but like you guys, Europe has been very clear that blockchain technology can provide benefits, not just in terms of job creation, but in terms of providing safety, assurance, and so on. But there is, or will be, a lot of issues to address before we can basically integrate blockchain into how we work and how we think. What are Europe doing? Well, you're probably as aware of this as I am, because you're probably very much aware of things like Horizon 2020. But Europe has made funding opportunities available for blockchain. And it is starting to look at the legislative underpinnings to help blockchain work. Most importantly, I think it's starting to look at a regulatory sandbox. And I think it needs to do this in more areas. It's got an EU observatory, which is good, which is learning from what the various countries are doing. And it's also engaging the private sector. It has also kicked off a range of projects which it hopes will ultimately become the case studies of the future that we can build upon. Here are some of them, and we've been involved in several of them. One of them, the European Self-Sovereign Identity and Social Security. There's one in debt and financing. There's one in asylum applications. There have been some for certification, academic certification, and so on. And these are all moving along quite slowly, but at least they're moving along. And as we get into the presentation, I'll try and explain why they're moving along quite slowly. But I think the key thing here is that, like yourselves, like Ireland nationally, Europe is starting to try and understand how it morphs into a different world, and a world that is very much underpinned by digital. And obviously, blockchain has a key role to play in this new digital world. I think, though, there has been a risk, and certainly I've felt a great sense of this when Europe talks about disruptive technologies, that at times it puts the cart before the horse. I'll try and explain what that means. In 2019, at the start of the year, we got involved with actually a number of people in the room. Barry O'Connor, thinks here as well. Dave Feenan's here. And we had a 2-day blockathon event. And it was actually really successful. There was some great talks. People were very enthused. We did the whole pizza thing. And I was very fortunate to be in the panel of judges. And we judged, I can't remember whether it was 5 or 6 really, really good solutions. The difficulty, though, was that every one of the solutions might have been done even better by not using blockchain. And I think the key lesson in that is that we won't succeed in government by trying to find problems that blockchain will solve. We will succeed by putting out problems that blockchain may be the best way to resolve those problems. And we had a similar situation when Europe was starting up its blockchain initiative. And basically, they called the first meeting, and every country was to come along and talk about where it was using blockchain. So I set up a meeting with welfare, with revenue, with agriculture, our big hitting IT service organizations. And we got in a room with a whiteboard and we started writing down ideas of where blockchain would work. But then, of course, what we realized was Ireland was a small country. Everyone tends to know everyone else. Certainly all the public services know all the public services. And all our data, or most of our data, was being held in the same data center. And so when we were looking at problems that, say, Germany or Switzerland were having, where there are effectively a number of governments glued together within a federal state, Ireland doesn't have that. Ireland has a very small country which is effectively got its own internal ecosystem. And so it is so built upon trust of the various organizations. It's not necessarily an area where blockchain lends itself particularly well in all the scenarios that we looked at. But I want to get on to that because I think there were other things that we found where we thought it definitely could be useful. So how do we then look at blockchain at a national level? Because the reality is that, first of all, we've loads of legacy. So, you know, our big systems, if you think of our welfare systems, our tax systems, and you think of our agriculture-related systems, they tend to be some of the biggest systems in the state. They've been around for many, many years. Some of them actually use, you know, mini computers and so on. We still have a bit of VAX within the estate. And the reality is that every time they go to look at potentially rewriting those systems to make the most of the most modern technologies, there's a change in legislation. And that means that the focus has to be on what we've got now and taking what we've got now forward. And if you think of revenue, for example, we had the whole changes to the PAYE system, which they did a fantastic job at delivering on time within budget. Then over the summer, there were all these changes in legislation because of the pandemic. Welfare were developing the whole PUP system. And so we have used these systems incredibly well to deliver the needs of the people. But then they remain legacy systems because they're always meeting a new purpose. They don't stay in the same position for very long. We also have very unique national legislation. And just to give you an example of that, one of the things that Europe is very keen on, which blockchain could actually help, is the whole idea of a European e-identity. And the idea would be that if someone from Germany wanted to come and live in Ireland, they could use their national e-identity to be a trusted in Ireland so as they could buy a property, for example, because they're coming to work in Ireland. And I was speaking at a Gartner event, and I actually used the example of a German being able to buy a property to come and live in Ireland because they're coming to work here before they've set foot in the country. And John Barron, the revenue CIO, said to me afterwards, he said, "That was a good presentation. You do know it won't work." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because by our law, you need to have a PPSN to buy a property in Ireland, and you need to come to Ireland in person to get a PPSN." And so, in actual fact, every country in Europe has legislation similar to that. So the actual system itself would not work particularly well. And of course, the other thing is that Ireland is the only country in Europe which doesn't have a national ID system anyway. So we're having to look at how we would apply what we do have to a European context. So the point in that is that it's not easy just to say, here's a new initiative, we're going to use it across Europe. We need to look slightly differently at the problem. We've many needs and processes, and they're not always aligned. And I guess the best example of that is a government which is committed to environmental change, but also committed to agriculture. How do those two things sit side by side? And I think the issue that the government probably has had with digital is that when you talk to people in Ireland, you know, people will say to you, my family have had a farm for 9-10 generations. It's actually ingrained in our history, in our DNA. In fact, my own family at one stage had a farm in Ballinasloe about 150 years ago. Not quite sure what happened to it, but you know, we all have this natural route into the land. We'll not say that about digital. We'll not say that about blockchain. And so when we're dealing with our government and with our politicians, we're actually trying to explain something to them which is very new. And we need to develop a narrative where they understand how this new world can basically add value to the traditional world that Ireland's always known and it's been very comfortable with. We started to see that actually quite a lot with the pandemic. We've started to see a huge surge in government services being provided digitally, in people going and getting their own MyGov ID accounts and being able to do things fairly seamlessly. So we're starting to see progress. We just need to accelerate that. And that's part of the problem as well, that just the diverse groups of customers that we have. So government are always thinking of inclusivity in how it does things, quite rightly so. How we build inclusivity into our digital world is going to be really, really important. But we do have good ideas around that. I don't want to dwell on this slide because I could talk the rest of the morning on it. What I want to say is, though, that our focus in the last 5 years has been to build foundations for the next stage of our government. So in 2016, we did the public service ICT strategy. This basically broke into 5 pillars, or these 5 building blocks. The tradition or the narrative around these 5 building blocks was, if we're going to deliver world-class digital services, we need to work out a way to join up our customers' data. We need to start to look at how we share solutions and how we actually share across public service and indeed across society, to include the private sector as well. We need to develop capability, not just within our own people, but the civil servants who are setting policy, the leaders who are directing policy, and the public themselves. And we need to get the right governance and law in place. And we've progressed all of those. And I think we've put ourselves in a really good position where we can develop, I guess, to use the cliche, digital government 2.0 in Ireland, or whatever way we want to call it. But the thing is that we're now in the process of writing the next public service digital strategy. And we have committed to speak to various stakeholders like IBEC, like through Technology Ireland, like the American Chamber. I'm more than happy to have the conversation with you guys as well when we get a draft and have a chat around what you think might be in there that would help you. The people that know me most, and Dave's known me for quite some time, would know that one of my commitments has always been to create an industry in Ireland which is up there with the best in Europe and better than most. It's fantastic that we do have the best FDI ecosystem in Europe, and we're the envy of the rest of Europe because of that. But we need to also have the best Indigenous sector in Europe as well. And that's a conversation that I'm trying to start with government about how that happens, and I'll finish on that. When we talk about moving to the next generation or digital government 2.0, what we're really talking about is moving to from the traditional e-government model to a digital government model. Now, what does that mean? Well, OECD put it pretty well. They say that we used to have an analog government, and then we started to develop e-government. In other words, we started to develop digital alternatives to the way we always did things. So instead of going into the front office, we developed a portal and a MyGov ID and enabled you to carry out the same transaction using electronic means as you would carry out in an analog way if you went into the front office. But the thing about digital government is it should enable government to reimagine the service altogether. And I think that's where disruptive technology can come in. So what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years is try to move towards what we call user-driven government. And how we've done that is we've engaged the likes of Ipsos to run focus groups and meet the customers on our behalf. And in fact, actually, the previous Minister of State, Patrick O'Donovan, went to several of the sessions and met the public and actually got them to work through scenarios to say how they would like things to work and so on. We also engaged Trinity College, and we've now got an official partnership with them. And through that, for the last 2 years, we're just going into the third year of the partnership, we have got their master's class in digital marketing to take lifestyle events. So applying for citizenship in Ireland, well, you can see them there, navigating the small claims court, registering a business and so on. And they tried to do it digitally in groups of 6. They wrote up their experience and they produced a report with recommendations. And the 6 best were marked, and the minister provided a prize to the best solution. The reason why we did that wasn't just to have an outside view of government. We were very attracted to the partnership with Trinity for 2 reasons. Well, 3, I guess. One was they were experts at how you did digital marketing. That's why they were doing masters in digital marketing. The second one was they were the emerging generation. So government's sometimes in danger of looking at people its own age when it comes to delivering services. These were the people who would be using these services now and in the future. So a very important voice. But the third thing was they were about 80% non-Indigenous, which sort of reflects the new multicultural Irish society. And we've always got to remember that. We've always got to remember that when we're explaining government services to the citizens, those citizens might not have English or Irish as their first language. And so we need to think differently about the needs of our customers. And so we've been using this to take issues back to departments and say, you really do need to think differently about this. And how do we think differently? And this is really how I'd like to close, because one of the things that we did, and some of you guys would have been involved in this, we actually last year ran a GovTech event. And the role of the GovTech event was really, GovTech's a word that's used for anything. It doesn't have a specific meaning. I tend to refer to it as bringing together all stakeholders to try and understand how technology and government can come together to not just create better government services, but also grow the technology itself. In other words, if we can develop a great solution to meet a problem and it works in Ireland, then it could be sellable in other parts of the world. And of course, we have a perfect example of that with the contact tracing app. The contact tracing app was very much developed by talking to customers, by trying to find out what would appeal to them, by working with multinationals in Google and Apple and others, and by working with indigenous companies like Nearform, and coming together and building a solution which didn't just work for Ireland, but is actually now being used in Northern Ireland, in Scotland, in Gibraltar, in several states in America, including most recently New York and New Jersey. That, in some respects, is the North Star for what is possible when we all come together in trying to find common solutions. And that really was what the principle of GovTech is about, that we start looking at government problems and we start engaging the industry so as they can say, we really believe that AI is the answer here. We really believe that blockchain is the answer here, or maybe a different solution altogether. But certainly it works in disruptive technology. You only have to think of contact tracing app and its dependence on Bluetooth, for example, and a unique use of Bluetooth to see how this can work so well. The important thing here is, though, that GovTech needs to be a channel where both sides are listening, because the reality is, as the rubber begins to hit the road in some of these solutions, there will be a need for legislation. And it's getting government to understand, first of all, that the legislation is required and the value of it, and then to understand that legislation, if it's passed, the value then to overall society, and the fact that all stakeholders understand that that value is something that's worth working towards. And if you think of an issue that's coming up, actually, that's very important, one of the things that we can see could really help resolve some of the problems that we faced, that we raised with the Trinity College and with our customers. If someone comes to work in Ireland, so one of you guys, you're starting to thrive in your company and you want to grow the company, and some talent wants to come to you from, I don't know, France or Spain. The first problem they have is getting somewhere to live, and they won't get somewhere to live if they don't have a bank account in Ireland, and they won't get a bank account in Ireland if they don't have somewhere to live. And so one of the things that would resolve that is if government could vouch for who that person is. In other words, they apply for their PPSN early, they get their MyGov ID account, and through that process, government can then say to the bank or the landlord, we can vouch for this person's identity. We have checked their address with their previous address in France or Spain or whatever it is. So all of a sudden, government becomes an active part of an ecosystem which helps to improve business. And I'm sure we could think of numerous examples where this would work. So I'm not going to go through all the 8 recommendations. The important thing is, though, that government realize this is really important. And I've been told and promised that when the National Economic Plan itself, it does have many references to digital, but I've been told that the government are really serious about trying to develop the structures that will really help grow digital in Ireland as part of, I guess, the new Ireland that comes out of this current pandemic and is fostered by the Recovery and Resilience Fund and plans at not just a European, but also a national level. So in some respects, I think if we look to where our ideal benchmark should be, we should look at Estonia. And the history of Estonia is simply that when the Russians left, they left with everything. They took all the country's assets. So it had to reimagine a new world of governance and working together based around digital. And because of that new world, what you find in Estonia is the industry and government tend to speak exactly the same language, because they all understand where each other's coming from, and they all understand each other's contributory value to an Estonia that is thriving. And so quite often in Estonia, you'll hear a government minister speaking, but constantly name-checking the firms in Estonia that they're most proud of. And I think that should be our aspiration in Ireland, that our government ministers really understand the value that the tech sector is bringing, not just in terms of improving societal life, but in terms of the jobs that they create and the economic value that they provide to the country. So that's really all I wanted to say. I think I've covered quite a few of the questions, but I'm sure there's been others as I've spoken. So I'm very happy to hand over to Paul and try and answer some of your other questions.
Thank you very much, Barry. And I'd like to add to that the fact that there are several comments in the Q&A session thanking you for your presentation and addressing some of those points that were brought in beforehand. So thank you very much. And thanks to Donna for driving the slides there and facilitating your presentation. So again, several questions came in as you were speaking, and there were actually a couple from the end of the previous session which are relevant to this. So we will start with them. But there were a number of questions initially where people were trying to get a sense of the willingness of government to work with the private sector, both large and small, in terms of developing blockchain technologies as solutions. And you mentioned yourself the danger of putting the cart before the horse in trying to apply blockchain rather than finding blockchain as a solution. So can you just kind of go back a little bit and describe the willingness or the level of readiness of government to work with the private sector in applying these technologies?
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that, really, Paul. The first one is the willingness, and the second one is how can it do it? So the willingness is emerging. I certainly, obviously, I've worked with Pascal Donoghue, and I now work for Michael McGrath. And we've got Ocean Smith, now the new Minister of State. The whole of government obviously has been dealing with the two mega priorities in Ireland, which have been Brexit and the pandemic. And I don't think anyone really would thank them for energy that has been focused really anywhere else but in those two things. And so we've had this desire for a national digital strategy, which has been sat at final draft and will be done. And GovTech is very much part of that. And the government's public service digital strategy is very much part of that. I think, as I was saying in the presentation, we need to use that as an opportunity to maybe reshape it a little bit from where it might have been 2 years ago. That's probably the strength of them being held back until post-pandemic. They'll reflect the new world rather than maybe the world as it was 1 year ago or 2 years ago. So what I'm really getting a sense of in my conversation with government is they're starting to get it. But let's be honest, the current government was organised in a way which reflects traditional Irish priorities. So in other words, we've got a Department of Agriculture. We don't have a Department of Digital. So government needs to reimagine how to give digital that same bandwidth and priority that agriculture, for example, gets. Now, does it do it within the existing Department of Enterprise, or does it do it in a different way? They're government decisions. But the important thing is they know that needs to be factored in. So we've got a willingness, and then we've got a desire to work out how will this make best sense? And then we get to, once we work out the governance of it, how do we actually do it? And the big barrier, I guess, to how we do it is the EU procurement system. So we need to work out how to develop something in Ireland between the SBIR, which is okay, but it's quite a lengthy process of me saying, hey guys, I've got a problem. Any of you think you can help me? And you get a little bit of funding and you start working in that. To then we go out to EU Journal, and then that's open to everybody. So it doesn't really help foster the relationship with the startup. So we need to look at something in between where we can modularize a requirement and we can build it up incrementally. So it's basically we can benefit from our startup capability, but more to the point, the startups can benefit from it as well, because the reality is if you can get a triangle of relationship between government, startup and finance, the finance might go more easily to the startup if they know that government has a relationship there already and believes there's something that can be marketed. So it's about government having almost two purposes in this relationship. One, to deliver better solutions, but the other to foster the actual startup industry. So we need to work out how we do that legally within Ireland. It can be done because other countries in Europe are doing it. So we need to work out how that makes sense in Ireland. So that's when I say there's definite willingness in government. We need to turn that willingness into successful application. And I think that's, to me, a successful application is when 90% of stakeholders say, that's good, that's moving in the right direction. We'll never get 100%. But I think that's why, the minister I know has been very keen. He's met IBEC, he's met American Chamber. We are very keen to hear the voices. And, I guess my promise to you guys this morning is we will certainly have a conversation. Whether the minister's in the room or not, I'll have a conversation with a representative group of yourselves about what maybe should be in the strategy that could help you, but also help government as well.
Okay. Well, that actually partially addresses one of the questions that has come in, where the person is asking: is there a forum where government prioritized problem statements are aired to allow bodies such as Blockchain Ireland to respond? So you've already hinted at the fact that something more could be done there.
Yeah, we need to be more imaginative. So let me just explain how it currently works. One of the things that we did in the last public service ICT strategy was start to develop a completely new government structure. And so what's really positive about that is, in every one of the departmental boards now, there is someone who's the nominated digital leader. And they come together as a group, the Digital Leaders Group. That's co-chaired by the SecGen of Welfare and the SecGen of Deeper. And one of the things in that is they're asked to make commitments, and they're then challenged, have they delivered those commitments over the year? And, if you look at virtually every part of public service now, you will see initiatives that have come in the last couple of years and probably been accelerated during the pandemic. Just to give you an example, the gov.ie portal didn't exist 3 years ago. It was literally getting millions of hits during the month of March every day, because it became the go-to place for information and offers of help and all of those things. My GovID 3 years ago had less than 10,000 verified accounts. There is now 870,000 verified MyGovID accounts. So we're starting to see real growth, but that's not necessarily solving the problem, because the model that we currently have is very much starting with where we are today and how we go forward from that. The challenge of digital government is you guys saying, what about thinking of doing it completely differently? And then you start to look at how Gardner call it bimodal, how you run your existing service, and maybe start to introduce a new way of doing things alongside it, which ultimately overtakes it. That's the space we need to be if we're going to be the world leader instead of, sixth place in Europe.
Okay. One of the other questions that came in just towards the end of the last session, but is probably more relevant for this, was around how the blockchain effort is linked with the national AI strategy and national data governance strategy.
So the national AI strategy fits really well with what Europe and OECD are saying. I was involved in a workshop with IBEC last week in AI, and I was saying they read really well, and they're full of motherhood and apple pie, and nobody could disagree with a word of them. The problem is, how do you actually use it? And this is where government needs to move, and actually Europe needs to do this as well. We need to move to problem solving, because problem solving throws up various issues. So AI, we'll all agree in this room that we should use AI more and we should grow an AI industry, but we'll all say, but we need to respect privacy. So how do we develop a solution to any problem which hits that sweet spot between providing the best value but providing the best safeguards as well? And you can only do that when you start to pick apart the actual problem and work out a way to do it that meets the needs of all stakeholders. The contact tracing app was a perfect case in point, where we had epidemiologists who said what we really need is, and the public saying what we really need is, and the privacy experts and the DPC we consulted saying what we really need is. And we got in a room and said, okay, we can't do all of these things, so let's work out what we can all agree is something that can work. And we developed a model which provided enough information to get public engagement that they wanted to use the app, that the newspapers come out and said, this is the perfect balance between privacy and functionality, and we have the best app in the world. We need to learn how to do that with a number of things. So, AI, where's AI going to be value? It's going to be value in healthcare. So how will it work? How will it work in disease research? How should your data and my data be used to help Ireland be a leader in delivering the next pharma interventions for health going forward? That's a public debate. That's a cultural debate. And so, in some respects, the good thing about technologies like AI and blockchain is they're actually starting to encourage policy debate, and that matters. So I guess the answer to your question is, I think we'll start to see AI being tested in Ireland. I think we will start to see a sandbox approach. And I think then it's about putting out the problems and saying, so if you bring together AI and blockchain, how does that actually work? So one of the things that we're doing, I'm sure some of you are aware of Project Emerald. Project Emerald was set up by Irish Life, and then a number of other groups joined that, both on the consultancy side and the user side. But the idea would be, how do we actually develop KYC by using government credentials? And how do we make the lives of the citizen easier by making those credentials available on the smartphone? That's a perfect example of where we can make the lives of our citizens better. We can have government enabling better societal intervention, and we can grow an industry through it. Because if you can go along and rent a flat and say, can I see your identity, please? And you whip out your smartphone and show your government credential. Or you go to hire a car in Europe and you've got your driver license and your insurance certificate on your phone, then all of a sudden, all of this digital starts to make sense. And the interesting thing about Project Emerald is it's underpinned by blockchain. Because how do we know the credentials are valid? Blockchain gives us that capability. And so there's where the technology started to arise as a perfect way to meet a problem. And I know government's committed, because it was actually in a memo to government which was approved that we wrote, to develop this relationship with the private sector and look at how does private and public come together and share our assets in a way that makes sense to all stakeholders. And if you look at the GovTech principles that I put up, that's actually number one. So government are very much aware of it.
Okay. Well, I'm very conscious of time because there are some great comments just in terms of other examples of what's being done, but also regarding agriculture, e-identity, and several other things as well. But just conscious of time, one thing I would like to address from the questions that has come in is what about outreach to existing initiatives on the EU level? So I suppose are there things that Ireland is or can participate in at that EU level in terms of promoting these technologies in government and public services?
Well, I was thinking, we talk about, G to G and G to C and B to B and all this sort of stuff. We need to really get from B to G to E. In other words, government needs to have conversation with its own industry and represent that conversation in Europe. So as if we're going to European blockchain events, which we do, we're coming with an agenda which we've derived with you guys. That needs to be how we do stuff. We need to do this with AI. We need to do it with blockchain. We need to do it with the whole digital space where we're developing the agenda together. Because at the end of the day, we are all stakeholders in Ireland. Everyone either through company taxes, through individual taxes, through employing people, through providing valuable services, through contributing to GDP. We're all in this same boat together. And I think it's working out how we use that to basically influence not just national policy, but also European policy as well. And to be fair to them, they are very open to innovation. I have spoken in European forums several times in the last year about things like our Data Sharing and Governance Act, where they recognised that how Ireland approached that was much better than anyone else had managed to think through. Our contact tracing app, which is the same, where when others were battling about how to do that, we had one out there and we were learning from that and constantly modifying it. So they're good examples of where when we all get in the same room and work on our problems together, we end up in a better space.
Okay. There are actually quite a number of other questions there, which unfortunately we simply don't have time to address. But thank you, everybody, for providing questions and insights. There are one or two in terms of how to best contact yourself and your team, and in terms of Blockchain Ireland working with you. So I think that's something we can address afterwards offline, and we can let members know how in general collaborative efforts can be brought together and combine skills. So Barry, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and your presentation this morning, as well as your willingness to answer questions. So thank you very much. I'm actually going to hand over now to Professor O'Connor just to round out and for another bit of information in terms of what is upcoming. So from me, thank you very much to everybody this morning, and to all the attendees and all the questions. There's some great stuff there, and anything we haven't addressed, we'll definitely do our best to address offline. So thank you very much. Professor O'Connor.
Well, what an amazing morning. And I'd like to thank everybody who's come and attended. But what we got from you, Barry, is so exciting, because it's a vision, a leadership from the government CIO to reimagine the future, to work with people, and to really put that really exciting perspective on solving problems. And this is where technology can come in, whether it's blockchain or AI. So we'll certainly take up your offer of working together. And thank you, the audience, as well, for all your questions, because that has also helped set the agenda. So I'd like to thank Donna Boyne, who facilitated the webinar. Thank you very much, Donna, for all of that. And I'd like you, all of you who are here, to come to our next meeting, which will be on December the 15th. We look forward to bringing you international speakers and national speakers. So thank you for your participation today. Thank you for your ideas, for your enthusiasm. And we hope to see you then on December the 15th. Stay well, keep safe, and look after yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. You might be interested to know we are now taking expressions of interest for our Masters in Blockchain, which will commence September 2021. Just email your CV to info@ictskillnet.ie.